Paris' wealthy CEO took his mistress to a gala to shame his ex-wife, but she made him regret it on. Naomi Caldwell moved through the crowd like water through silk. Every head turned, every conversation paused. The black velvet dress hugged curves that had once belonged to Bryce Langston's world, but now commanded a room full of tech billionaires who suddenly remembered why they'd always found her fascinating. Have you ever wanted to show someone who underestimated you exactly what they lost? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She walked into that Beverly Hills ballroom like she owned it, because technically she did. What her billionaire ex-husband didn't know was that his empire now ran on her money. Her connections, her silent revenge served ice cold in Louboutin heels. The richest man in Silicon Valley just realized his ex-wife held all the cards. Have you ever wanted to show someone who underestimated you exactly what they lost? Tonight, dignity would cost him everything. But was this justice or the most expensive revenge in tech history? Naomi Caldwell moved through the crowd like water through silk. Every head turned, every conversation paused. The black velvet dress hugged curves that had once belonged to Bryce Langston's world, but now commanded a room full of tech billionaires who suddenly remembered why they'd always found her fascinating. Bryce stood frozen by the champagne fountain, his 24-year-old girlfriend Madison clinging to his arm like expensive jewelry. His face went white when he saw Naomi approach the registration table. This was his event, his moment, his chance to show the world how well he'd moved on. But Naomi wasn't here as the bitter ex-wife. She was here as tonight's keynote speaker. The crystal chandeliers caught the light in her diamond earrings. Gifts she'd bought herself after the divorce settlement. Her smile was calm, controlled, devastating. She signed the guest book with the same elegant handwriting that had once signed their marriage certificate. The same hand that had coded half his company's original algorithms. The same fingers that had built his dreams before he decided she wasn't worth keeping. Madison whispered something in Bryce's ear, probably asking who the stunning woman was that had every venture capitalist in the room gravitating toward her like moths to flame. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat had closed up the moment he realized she wasn't just attending his gala. She was headlining it. The event coordinator rushed over with a wireless microphone and an apologetic smile. Ms. Caldwell, whenever you're ready for your sound check. The audience is so excited to hear about your work with minority-owned startups. Minority-owned startups. The words hit Bryce like a punch to the chest. He'd been hemorrhaging clients for months, losing contract to smaller companies he'd never heard of. Companies that somehow knew his business model better than he did. Companies that offered services he'd never thought to provide. Companies she'd been building while he was playing house with his assistant. Naomi glanced across the room and met his eyes for the first time in 2 years. Her smile never wavered. If anything, it deepened. She raised her champagne glass in a subtle toast. Not to him, but to the life she'd built without him. Drop a fire emoji if you've ever dreamed of this level of comeback. What would you do if you had the power to humble someone who broke you? As she approached the podium where he expected her to crumble, Naomi smiled. Not the broken smile of a discarded wife, but the confident curve of a woman who held his entire company's future in her manicured hands. 5 years earlier, she was coding until 3 a.m. in a Montana garage, believing in a dream that would eventually become her nightmare. The space heater hummed in the corner, fighting against the December cold that crept through the gaps in the old wooden door. Pizza boxes balanced on makeshift tables built from sawhorses and plywood. Energy drink cans created aluminum cities around computer monitors that cast blue light across their tired faces. Naomi's law degree hung in a frame on the wall, gathering dust while she debugged code that would change their lives forever. She'd walked away from a corner office in Atlanta, from a salary that could have bought her mother a house, from a partnership track that guaranteed security. All for a man with calloused hands and wild ideas who kissed her neck while she solved problems he couldn't even understand. The venture capitalists want to see revenue projections again, Bryce said, rubbing his eyes. His hair stuck up in directions that defied physics, and his Stanford sweatshirt had holes in both elbows. They think our market analysis is too optimistic. Naomi didn't look up from her screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, writing algorithms that would later power artificial intelligence systems worth billions. They're scared of what they don't understand. Give me 20 minutes. She felt a move behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders. His thumbs worked at the knots of tension that live there permanently now. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're going to change the world, baby," she whispered against his neck as code compiled on 3 different screens. "And I'm going to help you do it." His hands slipped down her arms, pulling her up from the chair. The garage was freezing, but his body was warm, solid, real. When he kissed her, she tasted coffee and determination and dreams that felt big enough to hold both of them. They made love on the old couch they'd rescued from a thrift store, surrounded by the electronic heartbeat of servers and the glow of progress bars. Her law degree watched from the wall, but she didn't care. This was building something together. This was partnership. This was love that created empires. "What happens when we make it big?" she asked afterward, tracing patterns on his chest while snow fell outside. "We'll never forget this," he promised, his voice thick with sleep and satisfaction. "We'll never forget what it took to get there." Have you ever given up everything for someone else's dream? Tell me in the comments if you've been the silent partner building someone else's empire. The notification chimed on his phone at 2:47 a.m. TechCrunch wanted an interview. Forbes was calling. The IPO was officially approved. They made it. The night their company hit a billion-dollar valuation, she found texts on his phone that shattered everything. "Can't wait to celebrate without the wife tonight. Meet me at the usual spot." Her world crumbled in that penthouse bathroom while champagne glasses clinked in celebration outside. Success changes people. She just never thought it would turn the man she loved into a stranger who looked at her like an inconvenience. The Malibu mansion stretched along the coastline like something from magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Pacific Ocean views that real estate agents called priceless. The garage that had once held their dreams now housed his collection of vintage sports cars. Her old coding setup had been replaced by a home theater system he never used. Naomi walked through rooms that echoed despite the expensive furniture. Their bedroom had become his bedroom. The guest room had become her bedroom. The kitchen island where they used to eat takeout while debugging code now hosted catered meals for his board meetings. Meetings she was no longer invited to attend. "I have an early meeting" became his favorite phrase. It worked for everything. Why he couldn't come to bed. Why he couldn't join her for dinner. Why he flinched when she reached for him in the morning. Madison Clark had started as a temporary assistant during their busiest quarter. 24 years old, blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, and a business degree from USC that she wore like armor. She laughed at Bryce's jokes a beat too long. She stayed late for projects that could have waited until morning. She looked at Naomi with eyes that said, "I know something you don't." The signs were everywhere. Text messages that made him smile in ways she hadn't seen in months. Phone calls he took in another room. The scent of perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts when he came home from those endless meetings. Naomi tried everything. She bought lingerie that made her feel ridiculous. She planned romantic dinners that he canceled for urgent calls. She initiated conversations about their future that died in comfortable silences that weren't comfortable anymore. When did you first realize someone was pulling away? What were the signs you ignored? Share your story below. The night she decided to surprise him at the office, she found Madison sitting on his desk while he stood between her legs, his hands on her thighs, laughing at something she'd whispered in his ear. They didn't see Naomi in the doorway. They were too busy not caring who might walk in. She drove home in silence, her hands steady on the steering wheel despite the earthquake happening in her chest. The mansion felt different when she walked in. Not empty anymore, just waiting, like it knew change was coming. That night, she didn't confront him. She didn't cry or throw things or demand explanations. Instead, she opened her laptop for the first time in months and started researching business licenses, corporate structures, minority-owned startup grants, the legal frameworks for building something that belonged only to her. She followed him to that business dinner, and watched through the restaurant window as he fed strawberries to Madison, his hand sliding up her thigh. That night, Naomi didn't cry. She opened her laptop and started planning. The woman who had built his empire from nothing was about to build her own. And this time, she wouldn't need anyone's permission. While he thought she was crying into designer pillows, she was secretly building an empire that would make his look like a lemonade stand. The home office became her war room. Financial documents spread across the mahogany desk like battle plans. Her laptop screen glowed with encrypted video calls that stretched past midnight. Women's faces filled her monitor. Brilliant minds she'd met at conferences, former colleagues who'd been pushed out of their own companies, entrepreneurs who'd been told their ideas weren't worth funding. They called themselves the network. No official name, no public presence, just a group of overlooked women who understood that sometimes you had to build your own table when they wouldn't give you a seat at theirs. "Your husband's company is hemorrhaging talent," said Dr. Keisha Williams, her voice crackling through the secure connection. She'd been forced out of her tech startup by her male co-founders, then built a consulting firm that specialized in diversity initiatives. 3 of his top engineers just contacted me about new opportunities. Naomi made notes on her tablet. Names, dates, salary expectations. Information was currency, and she was getting rich. What about their non-compete clauses? Hard to enforce when the company culture is hostile to women and minorities. I have documentation. Marcus Chun appeared on another screen, joining their conference call from his venture capital office in downtown LA. He'd been watching Naomi for months, professionally at first, then with growing personal interest. His firm specialized in funding companies that traditional investors ignored. Women-owned businesses, minority-led startups, ideas that didn't fit the Silicon Valley mold. "I've got 5 startups ready to launch," Marcus said, his dark eyes focused on Naomi's face. "They just need the right back-end infrastructure. The kind your husband's company provides." Naomi felt the familiar thrill of pieces clicking into place. What if they didn't need his company? What if there was an alternative? The pause on the call was electric. Dr. Williams leaned forward. "You're talking about direct competition. I'm talking about better options." Naomi's voice was steady, but her heart raced. Services designed by people who actually understand what these companies need. Marcus's smile was slow, appreciative. "Your husband's an idiot if he doesn't see what he has." The words hung in the digital space between them. Marcus wasn't just talking about business anymore. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. The first stirring of attraction she'd felt since Bryce had stopped seeing her as a woman worth wanting. "Can we meet in person?" Marcus asked as the call wound down. "I have some contracts you should see. Have you ever turned your pain into power? When life broke you, did you rebuild stronger? Drop a crown emoji if you know what it means to rise." She scheduled the meeting for the next day, choosing a restaurant where Bryce would never think to look for her. As she closed her laptop, she caught her reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back looked familiar, but different. Hungry, determined, dangerous. The divorce papers were drawn up, but she hadn't signed them yet. Not because she hoped he'd change, but because she needed 3 more months to complete the acquisition that would put his company's main server infrastructure under her control. Madison thought she was winning the war by stealing a husband. She had no idea she was just a pawn in a much bigger game. Madison Clark had it all figured out. She'd studied the playbook. Be young when he's feeling old. Be impressed when he's feeling unappreciated. Be available when his wife is busy building the dreams that made him rich. She wore short skirts to board meetings and asked questions that made him feel smart. She stayed late and arrived early, slowly becoming indispensable to his routine. What she didn't understand was that she wasn't stealing Bryce from Naomi. She was freeing Naomi from Bryce. The paparazzi loved them. Tech billionaire with his stunning young girlfriend, dining at restaurants that required month-long reservations. Madison posed perfectly beside his Lamborghini, her Instagram followers climbing toward 1 million. She wore diamonds he bought her to events where cameras flashed and reporters asked about wedding plans. Meanwhile, Naomi attended the same charity functions alone, elegant in simple black dresses that cost half of Madison's entire wardrobe. She smiled graciously when people whispered, She donated generously to causes she actually cared about. She networked with purpose while Madison networked for photographs. The entertainment reporter cornered her outside the children's hospital benefit, cameras rolling before Naomi could step away. "Mrs. Langston, any comment on your husband's new relationship?" Naomi's smile was diamond sharp, devastating in its sincerity. "I wish them the happiness they deserve." The internet exploded, not at her words, but at how devastatingly beautiful she looked saying them. Hashtag Naomi Grace started trending. Fashion blogs analyzed her revenge dress. Twitter declared her the classiest woman in tech. Madison threw her phone across Bryce's penthouse that night, furious at being upstaged by a woman who wasn't even trying. "Why does everyone love her more than me?" Bryce didn't answer because he was staring at the same clips, remembering when Naomi used to smile at him like that. Back when her approval meant everything. Back when he was smart enough to want it. Marcus cornered Naomi in a hotel elevator after a business conference, his presence filling the small space with expensive cologne and dangerous possibility. The elevator climbed 20 floors while they stood inches apart, the air between them charged with something that had nothing to do with business. "When you're ready to be seen again," he said, his voice low, "I'll be waiting." Her breath caught. When was the last time a man had looked at her like she was a prize instead of a problem? When was the last time someone had seen her worth before she had to prove it? Have you ever been replaced by someone younger? How did you handle watching someone flaunt what used to be yours? Share your strength story. The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. Marcus's hand brushed hers as he stepped aside to let her pass. The contact lasted half a second and left her skin burning. That night, she signed a first contract that would put Bryce's company's data servers under her control. As her pen moved across the signature line, she thought about elevators and second chances and the difference between being wanted and being needed. She signed the divorce papers with the same pen she used to sign the contracts that would destroy him. Poetic justice in permanent ink. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money. Law books lined the walls like silent witnesses to the end of dreams. Naomi sat across from Daniel Morrison, the best divorce attorney money could buy, while he arranged documents that would legally sever 5 years of marriage. "He's agreed to the settlement terms," Morrison said, sliding papers across the mahogany table. "The house in Malibu, half the company's stock, alimony for 3 years. It's generous, considering the circumstances." Naomi almost laughed. Generous. As if he was doing her a favor by giving her half of what she'd helped build. As if her nights coding in that freezing garage were worth a percentage of his success story. She signed her name with careful precision. Each letter was a small act of freedom. "There's one more thing," Morrison said, producing another set of documents. "The infrastructure contracts for Lang Corp's server systems. Your business attorney sent these over for your signature as well." Naomi's smile was secret, satisfied. 3 contracts that would transfer Bryce's most critical business dependencies to her newly formed consulting company. Legal. Ironclad. Devastating. The same pen. The same day. Ending one life and beginning another. Moving day came with autumn rain and Marcus Chun carrying boxes from her penthouse to his truck. She'd refused his offer to hire movers, wanting to touch everything she was taking, to choose what deserved space in her new life. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," Marcus said as they worked side by side in what used to be their bedroom. His hands were gentle as he wrapped her law degree in bubble wrap, treating it like the treasure it was. Their bodies moved around each other in the empty space, a dance of almost touches and careful distances. When he lifted a box from the top shelf, she had to step closer to guide it down. His chest pressed against her back, solid and warm. His breath stirred her hair. "Naomi," he said quietly. She turned in the circle of his arms, looking up into dark eyes that saw her completely. This close, she could count his eyelashes, feel the heat radiating from his skin. Her hands found the front of his shirt, fingers curling into the fabric. "I'm still married," she whispered, even as her body leaned into his. "Not where it counts," he replied, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You stopped being his wife the day he stopped seeing you. What's harder, walking away from someone who hurt you, or building something new without them. Tell me about your fresh start story. She moved into a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick walls. The space was modern, clean, hers. That night, she and Marcus christened her new kitchen island with takeout Chinese food and champagne, laughing like teenagers as they ate with plastic forks and made plans for the empire they were building together. As she handed over the keys to their shared life, Bryce smirked. "Good luck surviving without me." If only he knew that 3 of his biggest clients were already drafting contracts with her new company. His empire was about to crumble, one partnership at a time. While Silicon Valley's Boys Club was measuring success in stock prices, she was building something they'd never understand. A network of brilliant women they'd underestimated. The warehouse in downtown LA looked abandoned from the outside. Graffiti covered brick walls, and weeds grew through cracks in the concrete. But inside, it hummed with the energy of revolution. Converted shipping containers served as offices. Exposed pipes and concrete floors created an industrial cathedral where brilliance echoed off bare walls. This was where the network met in person. Dr. Keisha Williams had flown in from Atlanta with prototype designs for educational software that could revolutionize inner-city schools. Carmen Rodriguez brought blueprints for sustainable housing developments that would cost half the price of traditional construction. Angela Park had algorithms that could predict market trends with 97% accuracy. Algorithms that venture capitalists had called too ambitious when they'd seen her Korean name at the top of the proposal. These were the women that Silicon Valley had passed over. Too old, too ethnic, too aggressive, too quiet, too risky, too safe. Too everything except white and male and safely predictable. Naomi moved through the crowd like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. She understood each woman's potential, saw how their innovations could support and strengthen each other. Where others saw competition, she saw collaboration. LangCorp's quarterly reports are public record, she announced to the group, pulling up financial documents on the main screen. They're hemorrhaging talent. Their client retention is down 30%. Their server costs are eating their profit margins. Marcus stood beside her, watching her command the room with quiet pride. He'd seen corporate presentations by men with Harvard MBAs and decades of experience. None of them had Naomi's instinct for seeing patterns, for understanding not just what was happening, but why it mattered. "What are you proposing?" asked Dr. Williams. Naomi's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm proposing we give these companies what LangCorp can't. Better service, better support, better results. From people who understand what it means to be underestimated." The energy in the room shifted. Conversations erupted as brilliant minds began connecting dots, seeing possibilities, imagining futures where their work would finally get the recognition it deserved. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the warehouse had returned to silence, Marcus found Naomi sitting on the edge of the loading dock, her legs swinging over the concrete floor. The city sparkled beyond the windows, millions of lights representing millions of dreams. "You're building something incredible," he said, settling beside her. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "We're building something incredible." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I love watching you work. You see solutions where other people see problems." The kiss was inevitable, soft and hungry and full of promise. They made love in her office afterward, surrounded by whiteboards covered in business plans and profit projections. Marcus's hands worshipped her body like she was something precious, something worth celebrating. Have you ever found your purpose in your pain? When did helping others heal your own wounds? Share your story of turning struggle into strength. The Tech Journal's headline read, "Mystery Consultant Behind String of Minority Startup Successes." Bryce threw the magazine across his office. He recognized the strategic brilliance in every deal. Only one person coded like that, thought like that, demolished competition like that. But it couldn't be her, could it? He hired the most expensive private investigator in LA to find out who was systematically dismantling his business model, never expecting the trail to lead back to his own bedroom. Jack Morrison charged $5,000 a day and was worth every penny. Former FBI, current corporate investigator, he specialized in industrial espionage and had a reputation for finding needles in haystacks made of legal documents and encrypted communications. Bryce paced his corner office while Morrison spread files across the conference table. 3 months of investigation. Bank records, business licenses, connection maps that looked like spiderwebs. The evidence painted a picture that made Bryce's blood run cold. "Your wife is not what she appears to be," Morrison said, his voice matter of fact. "She's been building a network of competing businesses for the past 18 months. Shell companies, vendor relationships, strategic partnerships. It's sophisticated, professional, brilliant." Bryce stopped pacing. "That's impossible. Naomi gave up her career. She doesn't even understand the tech industry." Morrison's smile was grim. "Sir, with respect, your wife wrote half your original code. She has an advanced degree in corporate law. She's been playing three-dimensional chess while you were playing checkers." The photographs were damning. Naomi entering office buildings he didn't recognize. Naomi signing contracts with companies that were stealing his clients. Naomi laughing with Marcus Chun at restaurants where they discussed business plans that would bankrupt Lancorp. "She's also having an affair," Morrison added, sliding across pictures of Naomi and Marcus kissing in her downtown loft. With the venture capitalist who's funding her operation, Bryce felt the world tilt sideways. The woman he dismissed as a clingy ex-wife was the mastermind behind his company's systematic destruction. The quiet, supportive partner who'd made him coffee during all-nighters was now making deals that would end his career. He found her in the parking garage of her attorney's office, walking to her car with documents tucked under her arm. Divorce papers, probably. Or maybe contracts for another business relationship that would cost him millions. Rain drummed against the concrete ceiling, creating echoes in the empty space. Security cameras recorded everything, but Bryce was beyond caring about appearances. "You think you could destroy me?" His voice bounced off parked cars and concrete pillars. Naomi turned slowly, unsurprised to see him. She looked beautiful in the harsh light, composed and dangerous. "I'm not destroying you, Bryce. I'm just competing." The casual tone made him want to shake her. This was the woman who used to curl against his chest and whisper that she believed in him. The woman who'd given up everything to support his dreams. The woman he'd thought was broken when he'd chosen Madison over her. "You're stealing my clients. You're sabotaging my business. I'm offering better services to companies that deserve better treatment." Her voice never rose, never wavered. "It's called capitalism. When was the last time someone who hurt you finally realized your worth? Is it too late? Have you ever had that moment of power reversal? Tell me about it." As he grabbed her arm, she didn't flinch. "Touch me again," she said quietly, "and the board meeting tomorrow will be very interesting. I wonder what they'd think about your anger management issues." He released her, finally understanding. She wasn't his victim anymore. She was his predator. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper, her name printed in gold lettering. Not as Mrs. Bryce Langston, not as his +1, as the keynote speaker for the annual Innovators for Impact Gala. Naomi held the invitation against the window of her downtown loft, watching the afternoon sun turn Los Angeles into liquid gold. 2 years ago, she would have panicked. Tonight, she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Have you ever had that moment when you realized the person who broke you actually freed you? She asked, turning to Marcus as he entered with coffee. When their worst betrayal became your best opportunity. Marcus set down the cups and pulled her close, his hands settling on her waist. "You're not the same woman who cried in that garage," he said, studying her face. "You're something completely different now." She was. The woman who once coded until dawn believing in someone else's dream had become the architect of her own empire. 3 of Bryce's major vendors now answer to her. His company's server infrastructure ran on her partnerships. His biggest clients were quietly shifting contracts to her minority-led alliance. "Tell me again why you're doing this," Marcus said, his thumb tracing her jawline. "The speech tonight. You could destroy him privately. Why make it public?" Naomi stepped back, her eyes fierce. "Because private victories don't change systems. They don't inspire other women to stop accepting scraps from men's tables. The dress hung on her bedroom door like armor. Black velvet that hugged every curve she'd earned through 2 years of rebuilding herself. She'd lost 20 pounds not from heartbreak, but from the pure adrenaline of building something that mattered. Marcus watched her prepare with the intensity of a man witnessing transformation. When she slipped into the dress, his breath caught. Not just because she looked stunning, but because she looked powerful. "Do you know what you're about to do to him?" he asked, zipping her up slowly, his fingers trailing along her spine. "I'm about to show 600 of Tech's most influential people exactly what happens when you underestimate a black woman with a law degree and a grudge. Have you ever felt that electricity before a moment that would change everything? That feeling right before you step into your power and show the world who you really are?" Her phone buzzed with a text from the event coordinator. "Car arriving in 10 minutes. Press is already gathering. Are you ready for this?" She looked at herself in the mirror. Hair swept into an elegant updo. Makeup that highlighted her natural beauty without hiding the strength in her eyes. Diamond earrings that caught the light like promises of what was coming. "Ready," she typed back. Marcus handed her the small clutch purse containing her speech notes. "You don't need these," he said. "You've been preparing for this moment your whole life." Through the window, she could see photographers setting up outside the Beverly Hills venue. Social media was already buzzing with speculation about the mystery keynote speaker. Tech journalists were placing bets on who would be revealed. As her car pulled up, she saw him through the venue's glass doors. Bryce stood frozen mid-conversation, champagne glass halfway to his lips, staring at her like he'd seen death itself approaching. Tonight, she wasn't haunting him. She was ending him. The cameras flashed as she stepped onto the red carpet. Every tech executive, venture capitalist, and industry leader would witness what happened when a woman they'd written off decided to write her own ending. The Beverly Hills ballroom fell silent as she entered. 600 conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the string quartet seemed to miss a beat. Naomi walked across that marble floor like she owned every square inch of it. Because in a way she did. Half the companies represented here now depended on contracts she controlled. The other half would be calling her by morning. "Look at her," someone whispered near the bar. "She looks incredible." But it wasn't just about looking good. Every person in that room could feel the shift in power. The woman they'd watched get publicly humiliated 2 years ago had returned as something else entirely. Marcus appeared at her side, offering his arm. Together, they moved through the crowd like royalty. Tech executives who'd once ignored her now stepped forward with business cards. Women approached with knowing smiles and requests for coffee meetings. Across the room, Madison clung to Bryce's arm in a red dress that screamed desperation. The young blonde who'd thought she was stealing a prize now looked like she'd grabbed a sinking anchor instead. "Does everyone know?" Madison hissed to Bryce, her smile never faltering for the cameras. Bryce's face had gone pale the moment Naomi entered. His billion-dollar empire, his reputation, his entire identity was about to crumble in front of everyone who mattered. And he could only stand there and watch it happen. Have you ever seen someone realize they played themselves? Naomi thought, accepting congratulations from a venture capitalist who'd once refused to fund her ideas. That moment when they understand they weren't the predator after all. The mayor of Los Angeles approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Caldwell, I'm so excited to hear your speech tonight. The preliminary reports from your consultancy work are remarkable." Senator Williams from the Tech Oversight Committee joined their circle. "The impact your minority startup initiatives are having on innovation rates is exactly what this industry needed." Each introduction, each handshake, each conversation happened within Bryce's line of sight. She wasn't trying to torture him. She was simply existing in her truth while he drowned in his lies. The event coordinator tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're ready to begin our keynote presentation." As the crowd moved toward the seating area, Marcus leaned close to her ear. "You okay?" She nodded, her pulse steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "I've been ready for this moment since the day I found those texts on his phone. They walked toward the head table, passing Bryce and Madison's seats. For just a moment, their eyes met. His held panic and rage. Hers held nothing but cool determination. The MC's voice filled the room. Tonight's keynote speaker has revolutionized how we think about inclusive innovation in tech. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Caldwell Strategic Consulting, Naomi Caldwell. The applause was thunderous. Not polite charity clapping, but genuine respect for what she'd accomplished. As she stood and moved toward the podium, camera phones appeared throughout the audience. This moment would be on social media within minutes. She reached the microphone and looked out over 600 faces. Tech titans, venture capitalists, startup founders, government officials. The people who decided which dreams got funded and which got forgotten. Her gaze found Bryce one more time. He sat frozen, his knuckles white around his water glass. She smiled, not at the crowd, at him. Good evening. 2 years ago, I lost everything I thought mattered. Tonight, I'd like to tell you about what I built from those ashes and why losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. The room leaned forward as one. History was about to be made. They say Silicon Valley is built on disruption, on taking established systems and making them obsolete. Tonight, I want to talk about the most important disruption of all. What happens when the people you've ignored decide to build without you? Naomi's voice carried across the ballroom with perfect clarity. Every phone was recording. Every tech journalist was taking notes. The live stream had already hit 50,000 viewers. 2 years ago, I sat in a garage in Montana, helping code the foundation of what would become a billion-dollar company. I gave up my law career, my financial security, my entire identity to support someone else's vision. And when that vision succeeded, I was told I was no longer necessary. She paused, letting that sink in. In the audience, several women nodded knowingly. They'd lived this story too. But here's what my ex-husband didn't understand about women like me. We don't break. We rebuild. And we rebuild better. The cameras caught Bryce's face going white. Madison's confused expression as she realized this wasn't just any keynote speaker. This was her story being told in real time. While some people were celebrating their success by trading in for newer models, I was quietly building something they couldn't see. A network of brilliant minds they'd overlooked. Women of color who'd been told their ideas weren't market-ready. Immigrants who'd been passed over for funding. Everyone Silicon Valley's boys club had deemed not worth their time. Senator Williams smiled and leaned forward. This was the innovation policy she'd been pushing for. We started small. One consultation here, one partnership there, but excellence has a way of spreading. Within 18 months, we weren't just competing with the established players. We were essential to them. Her eyes found Bryce again. He was gripping the edge of the table now. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the people doing the real work decided to stop being invisible? If the consultants, the advisors, the behind-the-scenes builders decided to step into the spotlight? The audience was completely silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. 3 of the top 5 tech companies in this room run their operations on infrastructure managed by minority-owned firms in our network. Companies that were told they weren't scalable or investment-worthy now process billions in transactions for the very VCs who rejected them. A venture capitalist in the 3rd row pulled out his phone, probably calling his team to check their vendor relationships. This isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. It's about understanding that innovation doesn't happen in boardrooms full of people who all look the same, think the same, and come from the same backgrounds. She could see people throughout the audience connecting dots, realizing which company she was talking about, understanding the implications. They told me success was about making yourself indispensable. I learned it's about making yourself unforgettable, not through manipulation or politics, but through excellence that speaks for itself. The applause started before she finished the sentence. Not scattered clapping, but a wave of recognition that swept the entire room. So tonight, I want to thank everyone who told me I wasn't enough. Everyone who suggested I should be grateful for scraps from their table. Everyone who made me believe that my worth was determined by someone else's opinion of me. She looked directly at Bryce for the final time. "Because without you showing me what I didn't want to be, I never would have discovered who I actually was." The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. But it was the man rushing toward the exit, his face white with rage and terror, that the cameras captured going viral within hours. As she watched Bryce flee the room that was supposed to celebrate his world, Naomi felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. The internet exploded before they even reached the parking garage. #Naomi did that is trending worldwide. Marcus said, scrolling through his phone as their car pulled away from the venue. "Your speech has been viewed 2 million times already." Outside their windows, paparazzi motorcycles weaved through LA traffic trying to keep up. Camera flashes turned the night into strobe lights. Naomi leaned back against the leather seat, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, reaching for her hand. "Free," she said, and meant it. For the first time in years, completely free. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts. Interview requests for major networks. Business proposals from companies wanting to partner with her consulting firm. Speaking engagement offers from conferences around the world. But it was the personal messages that moved her most. Women sharing their own stories of rebuilding after betrayal. Entrepreneurs of color thanking her for speaking their truth. Young girls saying she'd inspired them to study coding. "Look at this," Marcus said, showing her his screen. Bryce's company stock dropped 30% in after-hours trading. 3 board members have already called emergency meetings. Naomi felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, then pushed it away. She hadn't destroyed his company. She'd simply stopped propping it up. The entertainment news was brutal. Tech titan's empire built on ex-wife's buried brilliance. The divorce that broke Silicon Valley. How one woman's revenge speech crashed a billion-dollar company. "It's not revenge," she said aloud, more to herself than to Marcus. "It's just truth finally getting its moment." Their driver pulled into the underground garage of her building. Even here, a few photographers had managed to follow. Marcus helped her from the car, his arm protective around her waist as flashes illuminated the concrete walls. In the elevator, the tension of the evening finally caught up with them. 2 years of planning, of building, of preparing for this moment was over. She'd said everything she needed to say. Marcus pressed her against the elevator wall, his mouth finding hers with desperate hunger. The kiss tasted like victory and promise, and the kind of desire that comes from watching someone you love claim their power. "You were magnificent up there," he whispered against her neck. "Absolutely magnificent." Her phone rang as they reached her floor. Senator Williams. "Naomi, that was exactly what this industry needed to hear. I want to discuss bringing you to Washington as an advisor for our new tech equity initiative." More calls followed. The mayor's office. 3 different universities offering her guest lecture positions. A major publisher wanting to discuss a book deal. But it was the text message at midnight that stopped her cold. "I am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know. Bryce." She showed Marcus the message. He raised an eyebrow. "What are you going to do?" Naomi deleted the text without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. Outside her windows, the city glittered like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, Bryce was probably realizing that his empire was crumbling, that his reputation was destroyed, that the woman he discarded had become the most powerful person in his industry. But for the first time in 2 years, Naomi wasn't thinking about him at all. 6 months later, Naomi sat in a corner office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, fielding calls from companies begging for her consulting services. The same VCs who'd once ignored her pitches were now offering her partnership deals worth millions. "Google wants to hire us for their diversity initiative," her assistant announced through the intercom. "Microsoft is holding on line 3. And Tesla's team wants to schedule a meeting about their supplier diversity program." Success tasted different than she'd expected. Less sweet, more substantial, like medicine that actually healed instead of just masking the pain. Marcus knocked on her office door, carrying coffee and wearing the kind of smile that made her pulse quicken even after all these months together. "How does it feel to be the most sought-after consultant in Silicon Valley?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Exhausting, she admitted, but she was smiling. And amazing. And terrifying. Through her floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the building where Bryce's company used to have their headquarters. They'd moved to smaller offices across town after the bankruptcy filing. His empire hadn't just crumbled. It had imploded so completely that business schools were already writing case studies about it. Any regrets? Marcus asked, following her gaze. She considered the question seriously. About speaking the truth? Never. About how it ended? Sometimes. The industry transformation had been swift and merciless. Companies were scrambling to diversify their vendor relationships, terrified of being the next cautionary tale. Her phone rang constantly with opportunities she could have only dreamed of 2 years ago. But the personal cost was heavier than she'd anticipated. Madison had left Bryce within weeks of the gala, taking a generous settlement and disappearing to Europe. He'd been forced to sell the Malibu house, the art collection, even the Montana property where their dreams had first taken root. He's been asking to meet with you, Marcus said carefully. His lawyer called again this morning. Naomi's response was interrupted by her assistant's voice. Miss Caldwell, there's a Marcus Thompson here to see you. He says it's personal. They looked at each other in confusion until Marcus started laughing. That's my full name. I may have made an appointment under official pretenses. What for? Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee beside her desk chair. The diamond ring in his hands caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through her windows. Have you ever rebuilt something so completely that you barely recognize your old life? He asked, his voice soft but certain. Because that's what you've done to me, Naomi. You've shown me what it looks like when someone refuses to accept anything less than they deserve. Her heart stopped, then started again at double speed. You turned your pain into power, your setback into the most incredible comeback I've ever witnessed. And I want to spend the rest of my life watching you change the world. The ring was perfect. Not too big, not too flashy. Elegant and strong, like everything else he understood about her. So will you marry me? Will you let me be part of whatever you build next? Through her windows, the city stretched out in all directions. A landscape of possibility that she'd earned through every difficult choice, every sleepless night, every moment when she'd chosen to rise instead of break. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, her phone buzzed with another business opportunity. But for once, she let it go to voicemail. 18 months later, Naomi stood in a converted warehouse in East LA, watching 20 young entrepreneurs pitch their ideas to a panel of investors she'd assembled. The space buzzed with the same energy she remembered from that Montana garage, but this time, the dreamers looked like her. The Caldwell Foundation for Tech Equity had grown beyond her wildest expectations. 73 startups funded, 12 successful exits, 3 unicorn companies that had started with her backing when everyone else said they weren't ready. Next up, we have Maria Santos with a healthcare app for undocumented immigrants, announced her program director. Naomi smiled, remembering when she'd pitched similar ideas only to be told they weren't commercially viable. Now those same concepts were being fast-tracked by major tech companies desperate to catch up with changing demographics. Marcus squeezed her hand from the seat beside her. In 3 weeks, they'd be married in the garden of their Pasadena home. Small ceremony, close friends, and a honeymoon in Tanzania where they'd volunteer with a tech education nonprofit. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Could we talk? B. She hadn't heard from Bryce in over a year. The last she'd known, he was working as a consultant for a mid-sized software company in San Diego. His bankruptcy had been finalized. His reputation was quietly being rebuilt through charity work and staying out of the spotlight. Everything okay? Marcus asked, noticing her expression. She showed him the message. They talked about this possibility. What'd she do if Bryce ever reached out for real closure instead of just apologies? Do you want to see him? I think I need to, she said. Not for him. For me. They met at a small coffee shop in Venice Beach, far from the tech world's usual haunts. Bryce looked older, humbler. The expensive suits had been replaced by jeans and a simple button-down. His hair was graying at the temples. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." They ordered coffee in awkward silence. Two people who'd once shared everything now struggled to find words for the space between them. "I've been sober for 8 months, he said finally. "Part of my program is making amends to people I've hurt. But this isn't just about checking a box." She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity. Instead, she saw genuine remorse and something she'd never expected to see from him: respect. "I was angry for a long time," he continued. "At you, at the situation, at losing everything I thought defined me. But my therapist helped me understand that you didn't destroy my company. I did. Years before that, Gala. Ow! By building it on lies. By treating people like they were disposable. By believing my own hype instead of remembering what actually created success." A young couple at the next table was arguing about their startup's funding strategy. Their voices carried the same desperate ambition Naomi remembered from her early days with Bryce. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I'm just asking you to know that seeing what you built, how you handled everything, it taught me what strength actually looks like." She sipped her coffee, letting his words settle. "What are you doing now?" "Teaching coding at a community college. Pro bono work for nonprofits. Trying to be useful instead of just important." For the first time since she'd known him, Bryce sounded like someone she could respect. "I'm glad," she said, and meant it. Everyone deserves a chance to become better. As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, she felt the last piece of anger leave her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to peace. 1 year later, Naomi stood on the TEDx stage in downtown Los Angeles, looking out at 2,000 faces eager to hear her story. The red on the camera meant millions more would watch online. Building bridges from burned bridges, she began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd learned that her worth had never depended on anyone else's opinion. In the front row, Marcus beamed with pride. Next to him sat her mother, who'd flown in from Atlanta to watch her daughter speak. Behind them, entrepreneurs from her foundation, young women who saw themselves in her journey. "They asked me about revenge," she said, moving across the stage with practiced ease. "About how it felt to destroy the man who'd hurt me. But here's what they don't understand. I never destroyed anyone. I just stopped helping them destroy themselves." The audience leaned forward. This wasn't the story they'd expected. Revenge is about the past. It's about making someone pay for what they took from you. But I wasn't interested in collecting debts. I was interested in building something that couldn't be taken away. She clicked to the next slide. Photos of the entrepreneurs her foundation had funded. Faces of every color, background, and dream. The most powerful thing you can do to someone who underestimates you isn't to prove them wrong. It's to prove yourself right. Not for them, but for you. And for everyone watching who needs to see that it's possible. The applause built slowly, then crescendoed into something that felt like recognition. I get letters from women who say my story inspired them to leave relationships that were shrinking them. From entrepreneurs who pitch their ideas after watching my Gala speech go viral. From young girls who decided to study computer science because they saw someone who looked like them change an entire industry. She paused, thinking about the journey from that Montana garage to this stage. What would you tell your younger self about surviving betrayal? About building something beautiful from the pieces of your broken heart? The question hung in the air as she moved to her conclusion. I tell her that the people who hurt you are often doing you the biggest favor of your life. They're showing you who you can't depend on, so you can discover who you can become when you depend on yourself. The standing ovation lasted 6 minutes, but it was the message she received afterward that mattered most. Watching your TEDx talk with my daughters. Thank you for showing them what rising looks like. A grateful mother. Later that evening, at the celebration dinner with Marcus and their closest friends, she felt the weight of how far she'd traveled. Not just in success or recognition, but in understanding her own value. Any regrets? Marcus asked as they danced to music from the restaurant's jazz trio. She thought about Bryce, now remarried to someone his own age and apparently happy in his smaller, quieter life. About Madison, who'd used her settlement money to start a nonprofit for young women in abusive relationships. About the version of herself who'd once believed that love meant making yourself smaller. "Just one," she said, smiling as he spun her around. "I regret not knowing sooner that I was already enough." The music played on. The city glittered beyond the restaurant windows. And Naomi Caldwell, tech executive, foundation founder, wife, and woman who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge is becoming so successful that your past becomes irrelevant to your future. Dance like someone who'd finally come home to herself. If this story of transformation touched your heart, remember, sometimes the most beautiful thing you can build is a life so magnificent that the people who try to break you become footnotes in your success story.